This video is a tutorial on doing a normal drawing using an underdrawing after we've already done the blind and continuous contours of the same subject. So I'll be starting with a light pencil. I actually have to go a little bit darker than I normally would, but you guys will start by drawing very lightly. I just need you to be able to see it in the video. First thing I'm going to do is create a couple of lines just to show the line of the body angling back and the line of the neck. I'm also thinking about where I'm positioning this. So it may be center or a little bit off center. Then I'm going to follow up with some basic shapes. So you are probably familiar with some of the animal drawing tutorials that use this method. But in the tutorials that you might get in a how to draw book, they tend to be very neat. But when you do them yourself, you're discovering, you're learning, and you're going to find that they're very rough and loose as you start out, and you have to make lots of changes, which is why you have to start by drawing really lightly. So one change I just made is that this body is going to not come up so high. I'm adding ovals for the arms, the legs, and I'm looking at the angles. So at first I angled it more, and then I realized, oh, it doesn't angle that much. I'm looking to see how large things are in proportion to one another. And everything is depicted using very basic shapes. They can be ovals, they could be rectangles, triangles, or any kind of in-between variations of any basic shape. The key is that you're not using a lot of detail. So one of the things you want to think about is how things relate to each other. So I just placed that leg back here, but then I looked to see how much space should be between these legs, how much space should be in that part of the body. And it's a lot less space. They're a lot closer together. So I'm going to adjust that. So you want to make lots of changes as you work. You want to resist the temptation to get too detailed. So at this stage of the game, everything is very rough. I want to look at these things, see if they're lining up correctly. So sometimes you will see artists making different lines on their drawing, and I'm going to do this on my reference as well. I can see how, where does the back of the creature line up with the head? Do I have that in the right place? I might look at what's the angle between these feet. Do I have that right? I might look at what shape is this making and compare that to the shape I have over here. We already discussed this space there. So you can use any of those tricks. You might also draw a line like so and see where does this line up over here, and that looks about right. So now that I've checked some of these things, my underdrawing is complete. So now I'm going to start layering details over that. So right now I'm looking at my photo. You could be looking at your photo or your line drawing, or maybe even both at once, to get a clearer understanding. And I have my little critter right in front of me too. So look at the actual object, if at all possible, because you can see more details in person. So now I'm going to start layering some of these details over top. So I'm going to, let's say, put in the eye. And things may still be pretty rough at this point. yes, I am looking at details, but I'm not going to assume that they're going to be in the exact right place right away. So I'm still drawing pretty lightly. I'm still using my lightest pencil. So my number 2 or your HB, same thing. I'm looking at this front plane of the nose right now. So I'm just going a little bit darker so you guys can see this too. So all of these details, trying to get in everything I see as accurately as I can. And I will say this is actually my second time doing a drawing like this. I did one earlier today in class. So I'm actually getting this a bit more accurate than I did the first one, but I am sure I will make lots of changes, and I certainly did for the earlier one. At this stage, you may start to notice as you put in details that they don't line up together right. So for example, if the bottom of this jaw isn't lining up right with, say, where this line of the arm should be, I would make changes to make sure that they are more accurate. So make any changes you need to make. That underdrawing that you did is just there to help you. As I'm putting in these details, I still want to make sure that they fit in to that overall shape. So I'm keeping a lot of these things pretty rough at this point. I'm focusing on line here, so the contour lines that we've been learning about, and that includes a lot of these interior lines where things may just go inside the body, not just this outline that would make it look very flat if that's all we did. So including some of these wrinkles that are hard to see. But I can see them when I look at my figure there. So you may notice that I started out by making my tail a little bit more angular to help me see these curves more accurately. And then I can connect them with a little bit more of a curved and flowing line as I add in details. Again, we've got that interior line, so where one thing overlaps another, going in there to show the form. So don't worry if your lines are sketchy or rough. So definitely still trying things out, changing lots of things. And in here, I'm actually going to see different planes of these toes, so top plane and side plane. So I'm putting in that much detail. Same thing here, we have this bottom plane showing. So all of these different toes overlap one another. You're also seeing some of these planes in between here that you can't quite see in the photo, but they are there. And we want to add some of those details in here as well. So some of these cross contours, some of these wrinkles show that. These markings on the lizard help with that as well. And as I go, I may start to erase some of that underdrawing. So I didn't necessarily do it right away because I needed it, but after a while it may be more confusing and less needed. And that then makes room for more details. So there's this plane right along here that is changing the form, and along here. So we're now getting pretty close to having this guy finished with his details. So I'm going to continue adding details, but soon I will be ready to add ink on top of these. So notice I'm using some of these ideas about plane to show side and front. Do that here as well with this foot. As I get more and more detail, I can do that in these toes. So we're just going to finish off any of those details. So again, showing these different plane changes in here can be one of them. then we're going to be ready to ink. So I'm picking up my ballpoint pen to start out with, and I'm going to go over what I've already done that I'm keeping with ink. So even at this stage, I am still looking and I am still making changes whenever I see things that I can improve on. So I'm looking just as closely as I was before. And I can also be thinking about some of these same ideas about line variation. How do heavier lines, thinner lines, thicker lines, darker lines, how do all of those have an impact on how I'm communicating form, value, etc. in the drawing? So even if I am only using line, I can say a lot about all of those different things. And I often zoom in quite a bit when I am working at this stage of the game. Notice here, I'm not using a full line. I'm using maybe a partial line, a broken line, which is implied line, as we learned about earlier in the semester. Notice in here in the teeth, I'm actually grouping some of these to create one shape. So the way you can see these different kind of layers here helps create that sense of form. Some of these different layers and details I'm really only seeing on the actual form. So I'm still looking at this object sitting right in front of me as well as at the photo. So as I'm depicting some of these different lines, some of them are really heavy, some of them are much thinner. So a lighter line where it's maybe just depicting an interior plane. A heavier line for this edge of the plane that's at the edge of the form. In here I've got some really light lines to show what I believe is this muscle here popping up. Some double lines in here to show that front plane and the top plane. So again, these lighter lines showing these plane changes. So again, depicting this front plane and then the top plane. And each of these toes overlaps the one behind it. So a lot of these very light lines here echo what I had initially done using pencil, because I do want to keep those different forms, those planes, somewhat separate, so you can see that they are distinct forms, not just melding all together. So even here, showing this center of the tail, and then you can see a little of the far side. So we've got that plane change in here. As I'm doing some of these different markings in here, so some of these are plane changes. So there's kind of this wrinkle of skin here in the neck. And that's delineating an actual form where this neck separates from the body. So using these cross contours here and here and a little bit back there. So all of those can be fairly light. And then also very light, again, these stripes do help indicate the form. So they kind of change what they look like here, change their angle, right as the form angles and curves around the body. So, but again, I'd want to put them in lightly because they are just surface, even though they are helping to reinforce the form. And then we've also got some wrinkles here in the skin. And I can lightly put in some of these dots, but they have kind of irregular shapes to them. So don't make those too perfect if you're putting in something like that. So I can also put in this line again, indicating that plane change. And I can just put in additional cross contours just to help indicate the form. All right, that's the time I have right now. And I would just finish that off. I could erase some of the pencil. I might find that a few lines that I needed disappeared. So I might put those back.